Welcome to the show. It's a girl Sarah right here on Relax Radio. Now, I'm very excited to be here because it is a beautiful Monday morning. And earlier we were having some technical difficulties. And one thing that I really still find so hard to believe is we live in this day and age where everything is so evolved, right? I mean, everything is so developed, it's so advanced, and we live in this age that we refer to as the age of technological advancements. And being in all of that, being in that age where nothing is supposed to be complicated and you're not supposed to have any technical difficulties and whatnot, things like that still happen. And I'm thinking to myself all the time, hey, you know what? This is supposed to be the age where we don't have issues with technology. Why does it still keep happening? And this is a question I always have. And you have to agree, and you have to sort of accept the fact that whenever it is that you have important things, for example, if it's something to do with your school or if it's something to do with your job, and you have to host these functions, host these events and whatnot, and when you have to use the microphone or when you have to share the screen from your projector, that you always have these technical difficulties, and you're thinking to yourself, really, you had to do this to me today as well? Really, you couldn't pick another day to do that? And I know, because I've been there, we've all been there, and it can be very annoying. Okay. Now, tuned into Relax Radio, we talk about everything from technological advancements to also technological, faults that we have, technical faults that we have, but also a whole lot of other things like science, health, whatever it is that you want to know. We talk about everything, right? And we're talking about science, gossip, music, entertainment, health, business, economics. We talk about everything. So make sure you stay tuned. If you want to find out the latest on the most interesting conversation, if you want to find out the latest about everything that happens in the world as well, make sure you stay tuned. Now, you're tuned in to the sunrise with me, Sarah, and I will be keeping you company all the way until 9 a.m. because I have a lot of fun things to be sharing with you. And like I said earlier, today they're finally lifting the restrictions that were there in the United Kingdom for the past few weeks, for the past few months, and also, it's almost we've been there for 1.5 years. So we're finally lifting those restrictions, but that means that while we get that freedom that we finally wanted, we still have to make sure that we follow the rules. We still have to make sure that we follow, practice social responsibility, make sure we don't do anything drastic, we don't do anything that might harm all the people living in the United Kingdom. So make sure whatever it is that you do it carefully, that you do it with responsibility as well. So make sure you stay tuned. Because I will be talking about all of that. We will be talking about how to make sure you're safe, and we will be talking about all the responsibilities you have on masks, hugs, and hand washing. Okay, so make sure you stay tuned because that is an interesting conversation to be having. So, like I said, before we actually head into the conversation, I want to very quickly remind you that you can, in fact, go follow us on our socials, which is Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. That way, you can always make sure you are a part of the conversation, that you're tuned to the conversation, and that you always are updated and informed about everything that happens in the United Kingdom, but also all around the world as well. And don't forget to text me on 07852473473 to share your thoughts, to share your opinions, your experiences with me, because I would absolutely love to hear that. And don't forget to go follow our app, which is available on both the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store. And that means you can actually be a part of this conversation at any time of the day from anywhere in this world. And that's honestly, for me, I think that's the best thing. So make sure you do that. But right now, let's actually head into the conversation, which is about masks, hugs, and hand washing, and some new rules that you can actually use to protect yourself and others. So, Freedom Day is finally here. At least for those of us that live in England, freedom is finally here. And we have to say, while we are in a place that a lot of people want to be, we're also in a place that not a lot of us want to be, right? Because we've been stuck at home for so long. We have been stuck with ourselves, with our families for so long. Right now, going out and socializing, going out and doing the things that we used to do seems a bit weird, seems a bit different. Like, oh, how do you possibly get back to all of that? How do you possibly, go back to the way things were? Because to be quite honest, things are very different now. Things are very different than it used to be. So it's a whole lot of getting used to. It's a whole lot of relearning some of the things that we have probably forgotten about because of the pandemic, right? So, like I said, we're also in a place that nobody actually wants to be, because on one hand it's yay, we have freedom, but also on the other hand we have this uneasy sense that the relaxation of restrictions in fact has very little to do with the data that we currently have, and very much more to do with the fact that the government is probably bored of imposing COVID related restrictions. Okay, because if you look at this in their perspective, they've constantly been imposing COVID related restrictions ever since, ever since 2019. Now 2019 was when the pandemic broke out in China, but obviously it was 2020 when it spread to the rest of the world. And that means that they're probably fed up of imposing those restrictions, really lifting those restrictions, changing those restrictions up a bit, dressing it up a bit, so that is some change in some of the things we do. So in my opinion, I think the restrictions right now have very little to do with the fact that, with the data that is currently there, especially with the increasing numbers, especially with the new variants that are there, but also it has more to do with the fact that the government is in fact now bored of imposing different types of COVID related restrictions, right? So we arrive on this territory of personal responsibility, because they lifted restrictions today, so how exactly are we going to behave when we go out? How exactly are we going to change things when we go out? So, what exactly do we do now? That is a question that all of us have, right? So, obviously, when it comes to that, we have, and it's not just one question, we have quite a lot of questions as well. Okay. Do we wash hands? Do we wear masks? And in what kind of places do we wear masks? And even if we do wear masks, does that mean that we're going to, get assaulted for it? Because we've seen this before. We've seen it in some parts of the world as well. Sometimes when you wear masks, sometimes when you do things that a lot of other people don't do, you tend to get assaulted, you tend to get discriminated. And you tend to get into very uncomfortable situations because of it. So those are a whole lot of questions that we have. Now make sure you stay tuned, and if you have any other questions that you want to ask me, make sure you text me on 07852473473 as well, because I would absolutely love to share your thoughts, your opinions, and your experiences with everyone who's listening in. But also, if you have any questions that you want to ask, then make sure you do that, so we can make everyone else who's listening in aware of it as well. Okay, so like I said, there are so many questions that we have. So, when it comes to these questions, some of them are which freedoms should you actually grab with both hands, and which should you forswear for the time being, and which should you exercise caution around? And in terms of, wearing masks and being polite, so how should you be informed, polite, civic minded, and actually reasonably conduct yourself, and what sort of instances should you wear a mask? Now these are questions that we all have. Now make sure you stay tuned, because I will be answering all of those questions. But to actually get into this conversation, we'll actually think of the very first question that comes to our mind, right? Because the first thing that comes to your mind is there any point of wearing a mask if no one else is? Now that's a very complicated question, but it is a question that we have all been having, right? Because in some places you have to wear masks, especially if you're indoors, and if you're in crowded areas, then you have to wear masks. But if you're, by yourself, you're traveling alone on the road, you don't really have to use masks. And in some places, if you're using public transport, especially like in London, if you're using any of the transport for London services, you have to wear a mask, because that has been made compulsory, right? So in instances like that, we have this question, oh, is there any point of wearing a mask if no one else is going to wear a mask? Well, the thing is, the answer to that is, in fact, it's quite complicated, because you're not going to get much protection from this pretty cloth mask if everyone around you is, in fact, breathing freely all over you, right? Mainly, what you're doing is you're just offering them a totally unreciprocated defense line against a possibility of your own sneezing. Okay, and that is the answer to that question. That it's complicated. You're not necessarily going to get a lot of protection, but you will protect others from yourself if you wear a mask. And this was actually said by Christina Pagel. Now, or rather FFP2 and FFP3 masks are in fact quite protective. And that was said by Christina Pagel. And she says, if you're going to wear masks outside, then make sure you wear either the FFP2 or the FFP3. And if you're not quite sure what these masks are, they are in fact, or rather they tend to be white, and they're slightly padded disposable masks, not the blue flimsy ones that are there. Okay. But when it comes to, when it comes to you wearing the mask, when it comes to you wondering whether you should wear the mask, if you want to protect yourself, I think it's best for you to wear a mask, especially if you're going out in these crowded places. And if you're indoors, make sure you wear a mask, right? um, but basically, for you then you also have questions about, look, if I wear a mask, is it actually going to help the people around me? For example, if I have to wear the mask in my workplace, is it actually going to help the people around me? Is it actually going to help anyone at all? Okay, now for mask wearing to work at a population level, you need about 70% of people to be wearing them. Okay, so right now I understand you don't necessarily have to wear a mask. It's not compulsory for you to wear a mask. But if you want this mask policy to work, if you want things to work, then you have to make sure that the masks that you wear, that around 70% of the people around you are also wearing masks as well. Because when you continue to wear a mask, you're not just protecting against the infection, you're also contributing to this positive social norm, right? And it makes it okay for the people who still want to wear masks to wear them. And it also sort of reassures those people that it's okay for you to wear a mask, even though everyone nowadays is unmasked and don't really seem to care about their safety. So it's okay if you want to wear a mask. If you want to wear a mask, go ahead, by all means, go ahead, keep wearing your mask, and keep reinforcing the fact that you want to wear a mask, that you want to protect yourself. Okay, but remember that, having said that and having done that as well, you can't obviously force people to wear a mask. And ultimately, right now, wearing a mask is in fact a choice that they make. So if you want to wear a mask, go ahead and wear that. Now, there's a lot of people out there who actually want to get rid of their mask. And what we need to understand right now is, sure, we're opening, and that is in fact a political decision that's made by the prime minister, whether we like it or not. And it's in fact immaterial if we like it or not. But if you want to keep our society open, if you want to keep our businesses open, we can't in fact individually prevent transmission at a population level, right? But what we can do is we can in fact blunt the virus's growth. So if you're heading out, try to wear a mask, try to take that extra precaution, because it actually never ever hurt nobody, right? So make sure you stay tuned, because right now we're actually going to head into a small break, and after that we will be back to keep talking about masks, hugs, and hand washing. Welcome back to the show. It's your girl Sarah right here on the sunrise. It is a beautiful Monday morning, and I'm very, very excited to be here because we're having a very important conversation about what kind of social responsibility we have when we head out into society, especially because restrictions are lifted. We can go out and enjoy things, and we can, have that sense of we can finally have that sense of freedom that we couldn't experience these past few months. So, obviously, that is something that we're very excited about, something that we are, looking forward to as well. But having said that, even though we're free to go out, even though we're free to do whatever we want, we also have to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves, that we're protecting ourselves, we're protecting our families as well, to make sure that, we don't have another COVID-19 outbreak, because one was enough. You definitely don't need another one, right? So it's important for us to make sure that when we are taking these steps, when we're heading out, that we still keep following those exact same measures, those exact same rules that that we took, or the exact same rules that we followed, to make sure that we protect ourselves and our family. I know it's not a legal requirement anymore. It's not compulsory for you to do some of the things that we used to do before these restrictions were lifted, in fact. So these are just things that you can do, just extra safety precautions that you can take. So make sure you stay tuned into the conversation, because you can find out more. If you have any questions, I can answer your questions. If you have any doubts, I can answer your doubts as well. So make sure you stay tuned. But also, before we head back into the conversation, I want to very quickly remind you that you can in fact be a part of the show. All you need to do is just go follow us on our socials, which is Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. That way you can stay updated. You can always, make sure you're informed about the conversation, you're informed about everything that happens as well. So make sure you do that. And don't forget to and don't forget to download our app, rather, which is available on both the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store. And don't forget to text me on 078 to share your thoughts and opinions with me as well. Now let's get back into the conversation, because we were talking about, you know whether we should still keep wearing a mask if no one else is going to wear a mask, right? But let's head back into the conversation, because we will be talking about other questions and other doubts that you have as well. So, how crowded does a train have to be before you put a mask on? Now, here's the thing, okay? For your safety and for the safety of other people around you, put one on anyway. Unless you're on your own in a carriage, make sure you wear a mask. Wear your masks, rather. Now, supermarkets and public transport are in fact two places that most people can't avoid going into, no matter how worried you are about the infection, because it is public transport and it is a supermarket, and those are essential places that you visit, that you come across when you are, when you're going about doing your tasks, doing your chores. You have to go to the supermarket. Sometimes you have to use public transport as well, sometimes, right? And they're also the two places where you know the least about other people's circumstances, because you can't actually imagine anything sadder than being on a tube or a bus and all the old people are wearing masks when no one else is, okay? And I know sometimes it might seem funny, it might seem hilarious, but the truth is there is a lot of reason as to why people still wear masks. And that, for me, in my opinion, or rather in my perspective, is because we don't fully, I mean, we're not fully rid of this virus, right? It's still there. Just because restrictions are lifted, just because we don't have to do some of the things we used to do, it doesn't mean that the virus doesn't exist anymore, right? So it's important for us to keep taking some of those steps to make sure we still keep taking some of those precautions that we used to take. So, should we actually wear a mask outside? Now, the truth is, Christina Pagel actually says there was never really any point wearing a mask outside, because we've never had an outdoor mask mandate, okay? And it's not completely hard and fast as well. Now, that's what she said. So, for example, if you're in Leicester Square with thousands of people who are all singing "Football's Coming Home," that would be a greater cause for wearing a mask, but you'd be quite unlikely to wear one, right? So, should you basically have to explain yourself if you're wearing a mask in an environment where the majority of people aren't? Okay. Now, that's a question that we all have. If a lot of other people are wearing masks, then should you, or rather, if they're not wearing masks, then should you have to explain yourself if you're wearing a mask. Now, I've come across this a lot as well, when there are a lot of other people wearing masks, and or rather they're not wearing masks, and I'm wearing my mask, and they're like, hey, why are you still wearing your mask? Like, I'm a bit anxious about how things could turn out, so just to make sure I'm safe and everyone else around me is safe, I'm going to still keep wearing my mask. So you don't really owe people an explanation as to why you're wearing a mask. But if they ask, you can always say, hey, I'm anxious about the future. I'm anxious about whether there could be another COVID-19 outbreak. So just to make sure I'm safe, just to be on the safe side, I'm going to wear a mask, right? But the truth is, you don't really have to explain yourself. Now, this was actually said by Robertson, who's an etiquette expert, and he said it's nobody's business what decision you're making. And I think it's in fact quite rude to interrogate people on why they're wearing a mask. It's basically like the equivalent of saying, well, you know what, you're a bit fat, your eyebrows are a bit funny, or you've put on a little bit of weight during, or you've put on weight during the pandemic. Well, you know what? I'm aware of that because I look at myself in the mirror every morning. Thank you for that. But you don't have to interrogate people on why they're doing what they're doing, right? It's basically this level of a personal remark. So they can do whatever they want to do, and ultimately their choice shouldn't. You shouldn't be entitled to an opinion for a choice that they make. So should you offer someone a mask if they claim they're not wearing one because they've forgotten it? Okay, now in that case, it's actually again, it's a little bit of a gray area. You can offer them, but you have to make sure that it is in fact a light touch. You don't just knock someone like, hey, do you want a mask? You should wear a mask. No, that's not how you're gonna do, because that's just going to get aggressive and you're going to get into a huge fight, right? What you're going to do is just gently pat that person and be like, hey, do you want a mask? And if they say no, well, don't make a big scene out of that, okay? But obviously, you can then stand away from them. But if they say no and they refuse a mask, you can just be like, okay, and just move a few meters back, move a few steps back, and stay away from them. But don't make a big scene out of the fact that they don't want a mask, okay? And if you work on a team where people want to wear masks and some don't, what kind of company policy should you have? Right now, that's a big, or rather that's an important question as well, because we're all going to be going back to work. Things are slowly getting back to normal, and if there are some people who don't want to wear masks in your company, then what exactly should the company policy be? How exactly do you deal with a situation like that? Now, a lot of workplaces in Sheffield, in fact, have erred on the side of caution. So basically, not at your desk, you don't have to wear a mask when you're at your desk, but when you're moving around the building, you have to wear a mask. But what you can't actually do is you can't enforce it. You can't enforce people to wear a mask. So you need to, when you're thinking about it in that term, you actually need to sort of figure out that there's a need for empathy here, okay? And the reason for that is because you don't really know everyone's home situation, and the people who are worried need everyone to be wearing a mask. It's important to actually not to stigmatize them. Now, this is what I was talking about earlier as well. Sometimes because other people aren't wearing masks and you're wearing a mask, you tend to get stigmatized a lot for it, right? And the truth of the matter is, we don't really know how everyone's lives are. We don't know if their families, if people they're close to, or their loved ones are going through dangerous situations where these people need to keep themselves to make sure that they don't infect their family members, that they don't infect their close friends and family. So in that case, you should just let people do what they want to do instead of stigmatizing them, instead of judging them, and having a lot of opinions about personal choices. Okay, so those are a few questions. Now, another question that we all have, obviously, is should you wear a mask in a taxi even if the windows are open? Because the truth is, you can actually get a surprisingly good airflow in a car with two windows open. But you should in fact think about the driver, who doesn't really have a choice as to how many people he or she sits close to every day. So what's important for us to keep in mind, what's important for us to understand, especially when it comes to going out, when it comes to using public transport, using taxis, and using other people's vehicles, you might not want to do it. Okay, look, you might not want to wear a mask, you might not want to sanitize, you might not want to social distance. and that's your choice, and that's okay. But you have to always keep the other person in mind as well, especially if you're using a taxi. That person really doesn't get a say in who sits next, who, who sits in their vehicle, whether they socially distance, whether they wear their masks or not. So if you are, using a taxi, make sure that you don't make that person put themselves at risk just so you could get a ride. And if you are, going in a taxi, make sure you cover yourself, make sure you wear your mask, use maintain all those social precautions that we took back before the restrictions were lifted, right? And what exactly should you do if you want the windows open and no one else around you does, right? Now here's the thing. For Robertson, who's actually a woman, Deborah Robertson, she actually said that she's a woman of a certain age, right? So she's constantly opening windows at the best of times, and if someone wanted them closed and was really spoiling for a fight about it, I'd say that's not really about the window, because there isn't an easy answer to this kind of confrontation. Because how many instances, how many situations have we come across when it's not just about the window, people just want to pick a fight, right? That's just how some people are. It's like they can't go to sleep at night if they don't pick a fight. And I don't understand why some people are like that, but that's just the truth. Some people are just like that. So if it is an instance rather like that, what you say is, look, I don't think this is about the window. I think you just woke up today and chose violence. I really think that's what it's about. Okay. Except there is this general rule that Deborah Robertson follows. Okay. You have to have kindness at the front of your mind. And that's actually for perfectly understandable reasons, because, when you're someone who is constantly going out, when you're opening windows and whatnot, you have to make sure that you have kindness at the front of your mind, and for perfectly understandable reasons. Because right now we're all in a state of hyper awareness, right? And we're always worried, and we're thinking about how are we going to make the other people around us mad? Are we going to make them angry? How is it going to happen? And because we're so focused on trying to make sure that we don't do anything like that, we are very concerned and we're overthinking things, right? So it's important for, if you are, really considering whether you want to open windows, if other people don't want to, then you really need to make sure you're kind, make sure you understand why some people wouldn't want you to necessarily open the window. Okay. You also have other questions like, if the person sitting next to you has a mask on, and if that mask is on, is it actually over their nose or under their nose? Okay, that's been one of the biggest issues in the pandemic. How, and I find it annoying as well, how people sometimes still wear their masks under their nose. Like, no, it's supposed to cover your nose, please cover your nose too. And we always have this question of, is he too close to me? Is she too close to me? And this is a problem that I've had to face a lot when I use public transport. I always feel like people are way too close to me, especially in the middle of a pandemic. You're not supposed to be this close to people, right? But you need to keep it in mind that people are in fact just doing the best they can, and whatever they're doing, they're not actually doing it to you. They're not doing it to make sure you feel uncomfortable or make sure you don't feel safe. Okay, so it's important to keep that kindness at the front of your mind, to make sure you're aware that everyone is doing their best, everyone is struggling in the middle of a pandemic as well. Now make sure you stay tuned, because right now we're going to head into a small break, but after that we'll obviously be back to keep talking about masks, hugs, and hand washing
again. But now, if you say to a child, if I went up to a child and said, you've had one to forget, God, there'd be an inquest. Me, why did you reject my son? Oh, I haven't rejected your son.
I want to talk about, how the generation gap, has how much it's changed, especially when you check the youth nowadays in comparison, to people back in the day.
I'd say when I was younger, it was more disciplined. Not now.
In comparison to now.
Not at all. Not now. The way things are nowadays, the younger generation, you seem that they can't accept the word no, if that makes sense.
They can't accept rejection, essentially, is all you're trying to say.
Yeah, they can't accept the word no. So if you, how did I do? Or you didn't do very well, and they get upset. And when I was a youngster, my father used to say to me, because I used to be sport mad when I was very young, well, I still am sport mad, but like participating in different sports. And if I had a bad game, for example, my dad would say to me, "You had one to forget." That's it.
Your dad sounds like a smart guy. I mean, yeah, that's the real fact of the matter. Yeah.
You know, he'd say to me, "You had one to forget. Get over it," and that was it. So I dust myself down and do it again. But now, if you say to a child, if I went up to a child and said, "You've had one to forget," God, there'd be an inquest. An inquest. They'd ask me, "Why did you reject my son?" "Oh, I haven't rejected your son. Or daughter. I've just told them that they need to buck their ideas up."
That's the truth right there. I mean, if you think about it, if you check the generations, like right now in the US as well, I've seen a lot of these things as well. In the UK, you know, you get medals for participation. But what's the point? What are you trying to? Yeah, what's the point? Either you win or you lose. People are so afraid to put that whole notion of losing. You know, when it comes to right now, the generation gap is just crazy. You know how much. A lot has changed. Social media has taken control of our lives, and we don't even realize it anymore. We're crippled because of it.
That's absolutely right, Nick. Because, as you said, you know, nowadays it seems that you get rewarded for failure. You know, for the life of me, Nick, I can't get my head around that. Perhaps I'm just getting old and morbid. I don't know. I just can't get my head around how you could be rewarded for failure.
Welcome back to the show. It's your girl Sarah right here on Relax Radio. Super, super excited to be here on this beautiful Monday morning because I have a lot of fun and interesting things to be sharing with you on this beautiful Monday morning. So make sure you stay tuned. Okay, now we're talking about masks, we're talking about hugs, and we're talking about hand washing. Things that we've had to, do or stay away from, especially in the middle of a pandemic. Especially if it was hugging. A lot of us have definitely missed hugging because we've had to make sure that we were safe. We've had to make sure that the people we loved and care about were safe in the middle of the pandemic. So we've had to take certain steps. We've had to take certain precautions to make sure we're all safe. Okay, now that's what we're talking about, especially with all these restrictions, with all these things that we couldn't do. Since all of them are being lifted, it means that we actually have a bit more freedom than we used to be. Obviously not complete freedom, but definitely some amount of freedom, right? And I think something is better than nothing, right? Obviously it's much, much better for you to be able to go out and hang out with your friends than to be stuck at home forever and not be able to do anything that you actually wanted to do. So that's what we're talking about because like I said, we are talking about masks, hugs, and hand washing, something that we really need to focus on, especially today because restrictions are just being lifted. Okay, now you're tuned into the sunrise with me, Sarah, and I'm very, very excited to be here on this beautiful Monday morning because we have a lot of interesting things to be talking about for the rest of the week as well. And I know today is a day that we were all excited for. In fact, because these restrictions were being lifted, it meant that we could actually hang out, or we can hang out with our friends, we can go out, and we don't have to follow some of those terrible rules that we had to follow back then. Okay, so that's what we're all excited for. Now, we were just talking about a few questions that all of us have, especially in terms of all these things that we have to do, the social responsibility that we have when we step out. So I will be answering all of that. Make sure you text me on 078-5247-3473 if you have any thoughts, questions, opinions, experiences that you want to share with me. Make sure you do that. Okay, and also don't forget to actually go follow us on our socials, which is Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. That way you can always stay updated and informed about the latest conversation, about the latest information, regardless of whether it's politics, news, gossip, entertainment, music, whatever it is, we have it here all on Relax Radio. So make sure you stay tuned. And also don't forget to download the app, which is available on both the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store. That way you can actually make sure that you know what we're talking about. You can always be a part of this conversation at any time of the day from anywhere in the world. So make sure you do that. But right now, let's get back into this conversation, right? So obviously, one of the biggest questions that we have is there any point of doing a lateral flow test before you meet people? Okay, and let's be honest, these tests are painful. Okay, you and I, we've been there. We know it can be very painful. We know that, uh, especially when you're getting tested for COVID. We've seen in other countries as well. Sometimes when you insert the cotton bud inside your, or rather the cotton swab inside your nose, you get all sneezy and it hurts. Well, the truth is, then you begin to have questions about whether it's actually, point, is there any point to doing a lateral flow test? Okay, because recently, thanks to a combination of their high false negative rate, and the naughty teenagers who actually faked positive results with lemon juice, lateral tests have in fact started to feel a bit pointless, right? um and you know how these teenagers are. They're always finding new ways to trick medicine, to trick tests and whatnot. That's what we used to do as what we used to do as teenagers as well, right? So obviously, since lateral tests have begun to feel a bit pointless, a negative test isn't actually a license that you're COVID free. Okay, so that doesn't mean just because you have a negative lateral test that you're COVID free. However, it's better than not doing any test at all, which basically has a 100% false negative rate. Okay, at least if you do, at least if you do a lateral flow test and it says it's not 100% negative, but maybe like 75% negative, that's still better than you not doing a test at all and then thinking you have a 100% false negative rate, right? Because you are, if you're going to be traveling, if you're going to be going out, some people, some places will in fact ask you for a negative lateral test, right? And then when it comes to lateral test, another question you obviously have is it okay to ask people to do a lateral flow test before meeting up with them? Okay, this is almost exclusively a matter of manners. So if you want to ask them, go ahead, ask them. That's absolutely fine, right? Because at the moment we actually have to be quite explicit rather about how we navigate this new landscape. And in my opinion, I've always thought, if you have questions from someone, well, ask them. Don't just beat around the bush. Don't be subtle about it. Don't throw hints and expect them to understand, because at the end of the day, none of us can read minds. I really wish I could. Not really, I don't think I do. But if I could, I wouldn't be expressing myself so explicitly. But given the fact that we live in a new landscape, given the fact that we are getting adjusted to new things, it's important for us to ask these questions and tell the thoughts that we have in our minds explicitly to all the people who are asking them. Okay, so if you have questions, just ask them. And that's completely fine. Okay, now look, I understand that British people are not very good at using words. We're not very good at asking questions, and we expect people to know what we want. So it's okay for you to actually ask them if if they've gotten the lateral test, if they're COVID negative and whatnot, right? And then, leave all of that aside. Something we've missed a lot during these past few days, during these, not even days, past few months, if I put it, is hugging, is obviously kissing, is obviously, hanging out with our friends and our family the way we used to. And obviously, then we have this question, can we start air kissing and hugging again? But the truth is, look, if you weren't a kisser or a hugger in the first place to begin with, then this really didn't affect you at all. Okay, because if you weren't a big hugger, if you weren't a big kisser, you would only hug and kiss the people that you cared about, right? Like your family or your significant other or your best friend. Like, those are the only people you would hug, right? So obviously, then the pandemic never caused any problems for you, because the pandemic just was all about making sure you don't hug people and you don't kiss people. So if anything, it just helped you stay away from all these people you didn't want to hug and all these people who always wanted to hug, right? So in fact, just helped you. Right now, for some other people, they will only hug people and kiss people if the people they're hugging are double waxed, right? And that's also because these people who want to hug other people and kiss other people, if they're double waxed, they will only do, they will only reciprocate those same emotions, reciprocate those same feelings if the person they're hugging or kissing is also double waxed. Okay. And I think right now, the most important thing for a person is if they've gotten 2 doses of the vaccination, right? Is if they've been fully vaccinated. So it's basically all about getting used to that landscape. It's basically all about making sure that you understand that landscape and you fit into that landscape as well. Okay. So when it comes to hugging, when it comes to kissing, make sure you're careful, because right now we don't really know if we're completely, getting, if we're getting rid of the coronavirus. We don't really know if things have gotten much better for us. We're not too sure if this is going to come back again, right? So what's important is that we take those necessary precautions. We take those certain steps to make sure we're safe and make sure family and loved ones are safe as well. So then when it comes to hugging, we all love hugging children, because let's face it, children are just cute to hug, especially if they're, toddlers, especially if they're babies. You love to hug them, you love to hold them. But how high is the risk for hugging a child, for you and for them? How high is it? Now, Phil actually describes the situation in Sheffield, because it's in fact a similar picture across the country. Now, cases are in fact going up exponentially, mostly in the 12 to 45 age group, and of that, mostly from the ages 16 to 30. But by the time you actually get into your 40s, there's a reasonably well vaccinated group of people. So there's in fact a few places that the virus can actually go. So if you're going to catch it, you're in fact going to be much, much more likely to catch it from a young person and, even children, than that of an older group of adults, from people who have been who have been vaccinated. And I still think it's unfair that they vaccinated older people and not younger people, because some of us, we're still in the process of getting that vaccine. Okay. So when it comes to instances like that, you're much, much more at a risk to catch COVID-19 or to contract COVID-19 from younger people than from older people, right? Because, like I said, the problem is that kids are generally the people it is most fun to hug. Okay, so if you're double vaccinated, they are a bigger risk to you than you are to them. So you can actually decide whether you want to take the chance or not, whether you want to hug them or not. Ultimately, it is up to you. And then comes the most important question of all. Okay, should we still be using hand sanitizer? Because we have been using hand sanitizer for such a huge part of our lives that it's almost become a part of our lives. It has become a habit, right? I mean, I can't step out of the house without my hand sanitizer. And sometimes, if I touch my nose and then I touch, like, say, my shoulder, then before I touch my face again, I have to sanitize, because I've gotten so used to sanitizing myself, or rather my hands. And the truth of the matter is, I think that's something good as well, because we're definitely much, much cleaner than we used to be. Because whenever I think of all the way we used to live before the pandemic, it is horrifying. Because, ew, can you believe that we didn't sanitize our hands? Can you believe that we didn't wear masks and go out? Like, imagine all those germs and all those things that we caught because we were so unhygienic. Yeah, I know, it's crazy to me as well. But the truth of the matter is, that's how it is right now, and I can't even head out of the house without my hand sanitizer. So, like I said, at the start of the pandemic, public health advice had overestimated the extent of non airborne transmission, and arguably, they actually put too much of emphasis on hand washing as well. However, having said all of that, it's in fact a very very good thing to still wash your hands. It's still a good thing to have clean hands, because you might even save yourself from something other than COVID, something like a gastric bug. So it's important for you to actually make sure that you still sanitize, you still wear your mask, and you still ask people, if you offer them a mask if they want a mask, if you have an extra mask. And if you're going out to work, you're in your company, and everyone else is wearing masks but you don't want to, or you're wearing masks and no one else wants to, ultimately it is your choice. Ultimately it is a personal choice. So make sure you do the right thing. Make sure you make the correct decision to make sure you're safe, to make sure all the people around you are safe. Because right now we're gonna end this broadcast, and we will be back in a few more minutes to talk to you about how exactly do you cope with loneliness. Okay, a huge problem that a lot of us felt during the past few months during the pandemic. So make